if we're able to verify age on all these gambling websites now, well, we can verify age on the websites too. On the
I wasn't as shocked as much of DeWine letting it float. I was really shocked that it got into the budget at all, right? Because if you remember from last year, I think it was 295, HB 295. We've been around this road before, and it never even made it. It never even made it through the process last GA. So, but I'm glad it made it through this time. And in most states it has been a unanimous thing. And it's a good move for Ohio. Plus, we've got the Supreme Court win in this area just recently. So
exactly that said the Texas case that said the Paxton case that said we can do this, right? And so you don't indeed have a First Amendment right to show kids porn. Go figure.
Unless you're a library. Hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Narrative Podcast. Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, David Mahan, all back together.
It happened.
Around the table once again. Thanks for holding down the fort for me, guys.
Barely.
Well, I was going to talk to you about that. I heard mention of a take 2 last week.
Yeah,
and quite curious about what the take 1 was like.
Take 1 is burned, right, Sam? We actually burned the soundboard board and bought a new soundboard. And just to be safe, posterity's sake,
leave no idea what was going to come out of this man's mouth.
Listen,
take 5,
and we're going again.
It's okay. I am back in the driver's seat. We're gonna keep this on track today as best as possible. I might be a little bit rusty trying to corral you guys, but we're going to give it a shot because we've got some exciting budget news to talk about. Indeed. As the governor has signed the state budget for the next biennial. We know what it's going to look like, and there's a lot of great stuff in here. So let's just kind of take the big picture, fellas. What are we celebrating today with the overview of this bill?
I'm working on, I got up at 4 o'clock this morning with no coffee. My wife has got me on a new diet. And
wait, really?
The one day I need coffee.
You need to tell us these things before. I feel like that's a decision CCV's got to sign off on.
That really seems unfair to the rest of us.
Man, it's about to get ugly. But
that is...
I mean, really, it's a good day. I mean, 67 veto items. This man woke me up with today, and it's got. I know it's a record for him. I don't know what the state record is. Yeah. But we've got some really great big wins, and you've heard us talk about some of them. But there are some big areas like the ESAs that got vetoed, and we'll talk about that. And some of the mostly all the property tax provisions got taken out. Yeah. And so it's starting a beef between especially the House. And I would say even the speaker and the governor, which is bad news because we've got about a year and a half of having to get stuff signed by that joker. So, but overall, I mean, it's a good day for CCV. But we like to have a couple of these provisions back.
Yeah, that's what's weird about this budget, right? Because on the whole, if you just go sort of point by point, as we will, there's a lot of really good stuff in this budget that got done. I think the overarching narrative, though, that I think that a lot of people are feeling is a lot of frustration with the governor's office on his vetoes. And as David said, there were a couple of big provisions that CCV was working on that got vetoed. On the tax side, on the good end of things, the Christian Business Partnership got their flat tax, the 2.75% income tax. But on the downside, the number one tax issue in Ohio right now is property tax, right? And there were a couple of big provisions on that. One on capping the amount of money that public schools can keep in reserves, because we're literally talking. The public schools always whine about how underfunded they are. They just neglect to mention that they're sitting on nearly $9 billion.
40 to 90% carryover.
Yeah, in reserve. So these schools are sitting on just massive reserve funds that, like David said, they amount to 40 to 80% of their money. And so they tried to cap that in this to give some direct property tax relief now and set things up for the future. And the other big thing they did is, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of the gambling stuff here, But again, when you're trying to do tax cuts, you're always looking at how do you go about these things, right? You either have to raise revenues, you have to cut spending, and one of the ways oftentimes they'll cut revenues that we're actually cut how much they're expecting to come in that we're big fans of is they close tax loopholes, right? So over the years, over the decades, we'll have budgets passed or bills passed that create special carve-outs for people to get tax relief. And our good fiscal conservative friends, and I'd throw us in that conversation, would say, hey, it's better to do tax relief for everyone than to do special one-offs. And so they tried to do that in this budget, as they tried to close some of these loopholes that had been created over the years. And the governor basically vetoed all of those things, right? And so that's what I think, that contention on top of vetoing, like David mentioned, the non-chartered, non-public ESA, and vetoing the provision on the libraries that says libraries can't keep, and we'll talk about that more, can't keep LGBT books in the kids sections of libraries, like just really ticked off a lot of people. And I think I can't remember this many provisions being called for veto overrides, but that's the vibe right now. And we're sitting here, we're recording a little earlier than normal on a Tuesday. That the members are pretty upset.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like this is, again, only my second budget cycle here at CCV, but as far as what we witnessed across the street, they seem to work pretty well together in the House and the Senate to get this budget done. Yeah. So it seemed like there was a lot of consensus on what the General Assembly wanted to see in the next
I've been on
budget.
the phone all day, and they are, the term that they're all using is fired up. They're like, Dave, everybody's fired up, right? But this is the week of the 4th. Yep. I know a lot of folks are on vacation. I don't know if the play is, any time this week, next week, or even this month of vetoing it, but technically they have the entire GA, basically a year and a half to veto this stuff.
To override it,
to override the veto. But some of this is time sensitive, right? And so with the property tax, things are the ESA, all these are time sensitive. But all of them that I've talked to are saying, we're looking at dates to see when we could get back here and get this work done.
So get your popcorn ready. That's what you're saying.
Right.
It's gonna be.
As soon as I think we're gonna land a plane on this thing,
right? David's getting ready to go off into the hills somewhere, and they're like, "Well, not yet."
Yeah.
Well, as we've talked about with the state budget before on the show, there's a mix of spending priorities and public policy that gets included in this. And one of the public policy pieces that we really want to highlight is the Innocence Act, as we called it, was included in this to really limit the exposure of children to online obscene content.
Yeah, Reps Demetrio and Williams this year on the bill, and that got in, and basically what that does is it's age verification for porn sites. And every state where it's passed, the first guy that gets out of the mix is the Pornhub guys, and more people go to Pornhub than just about any other website in the world. I think they're like the fourth most visited website in the planet, which is sick. And the beauty of it is that when you get rid of those guys, it cuts down on the inadvertent visits to these porn sites. They say about 65% of kids, when they first see pornography, it's inadvertent. And so all of those little games that they play online, the ads and things, it gets them out of the market. And so that is absolutely huge. And I'm shocked that made it in.
Yeah, I mean, this is one I feel like the governor has been pretty decent on these things. I think in the mix of all the priorities that you see going on, to your point, just like it was easy for a bill like this to not make it into the budget at all. I think once we were able to get it included, we were in pretty decent shape, because there's not, in other states, I will say, and you even saw this a little bit in committee when you testified on this. In other states, this actually has been a pretty bipartisan thing.
Yeah.
Right. And again, like a kid can't go into Kroger and buy a porn mag or something like that. Why should they be able to do it online? And if we're able to verify age on all these gambling websites now, we can verify age on the websites too. On the porn
I wasn't as shocked as much of DeWine letting it float. I was really shocked that it got into the budget at all, right? Because if you remember from last year, I think it was 295, HB 295. We we've been around this road before, and it never even made it. It never even made it through the process last GA. So, but I'm glad it made it through this time. And in most states it has been a unanimous thing. And it's a good move for Ohio. Plus, we've got the Supreme Court win in this area just recently. So
exactly that said that's the Texas case that said the Paxton case that said we can do this, right? And so you don't indeed have a First Amendment right to show kids porn. Go figure.
Unless you're a library.
Unless you're a library, right? Exactly.
Which is one of the veto items.
He takes that out, right?
Yeah,
that's the library thing. Okay.
Let's just drill in on that just for 1 second, because his veto statement on that was obscene materials are already banned from being in school libraries. To which, well, no one's telling the libraries all around Ohio that they're banned, because these books are everywhere, right? So it's the job's not getting done right now. And the second thing about this one that really ticked me off, right? Because it's a very straightforward idea of like, don't put stuff about transgenderism in the kids' library.
Yeah, boys can turn into little girls and little girls can turn into little boys. I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff for kids.
And it's one of these things that sometimes this is where acronyms can kind of whitewash what we're talking about or numb us a little bit to what we're talking about. This provision has to do with lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender books, literature. All of that has to do all of those identifying markers are all about who you want to have sex with. Why are there children's books about who you want to have sex with? That's what this is. That entire community idea all comes back around to these are the people I want to have sex with, and people now want to write books for kids to read about that, right? Don't let this be like whitewashed, or don't let this be glossed over of what we're actually talking about, and the governor vetoes that.
Yeah, there's 50 pages of this thing of override or vetoes, and I'm kind of getting perv vibes right now from DeWine on some of this stuff. It just there's no, other than the fact that he may not he just doesn't like Click, right? Maybe that's it, because Click seems to hold the record of who's got the most vetoes.
Right. At least it wasn't on his birthday.
Right. Yeah. Last year.
But this is my thing about this is that all I can think about when I see a veto like this is the conversation around that Tucker Carlson had at our gala in Cleveland a few years ago, where he said there's still so many, especially Republicans today, that are living in the 1990s and think that the opposition isn't, well, they're not that bad. We just disagree on a few things. We can all get along. And the public libraries, they're not being run by ideologues. No, the public libraries, you walk into these places and they are specifically targeting kids with these things. You don't accidentally host a drag queen story hour, right? You don't accidentally put a book out or put a book out just for diversity viewpoint about changing your gender, right? It's nonsense. And on top of it, sorry, this is connected, but a whole separate problem that I have on this is, why in the world is it okay for public libraries to use taxpayer dollars to lobby the governor to veto a budget provision, right? Libraries all over the state were sending out emails and doing calls to action, spending all this time and money calling on the governor to veto this. That's not their job. They're a government entity.
And the funny thing to me, in a lot of those emails that were sent to us by friends are like, hey, check this out. You saw some version of, well, we think parents should make the decisions what their children see. Right. It's like, that's exactly what we're talking about
exactly.
here. And when your kid walks in and sees it staring him in the face, the parent has lost that ability.
Right.
That is the baseline that we're talking about.
And go down to the Parsons Library in Columbus and tell me how many kids have their parents there with them. Yeah. Right. I mean, there's no parental choice happening there.
Yeah, a lot of times I'm in the community, folks are like, well, maybe just that know, what he's doing. I know at House Bill 68, the SAFE Act, Save Women's Sports, it was like, well, maybe DeWine doesn't know. One thing Trussell did, the only thing Trussell did when he actually got to the mic was he broke down his team, right? DeWine's got a great team, and he's got a legal team, he's got a policy team. There's a huge team of people that's informing these decisions like this. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he knows that this is a 30-70 issue, and he's still bucking the General Assembly, and he's still bucking the citizens of Ohio.
Yeah.
Well, we better move on because I think we're all getting a little feisty here. We're like 2 topics in at this point.
There's no gambling expansion.
Yes, we do. We do need to talk about that because we sounded the alarm often here on the narrative to get people involved, and maybe not to the degree that we saw with the SAFE Act and how much of a watershed moment that was, but certainly in terms of seeing advocacy work, I think this gambling expansion being halted is something that we're going to point to and say, no, your voice makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Mike. I mean, the time compression, right?
Yeah.
We had a lot of time with the SAFE Act and Save Women's Sports, House Bill 68. With this, we didn't have the time. And really, we were the only ones sounding the alarm. And at the State House, we brought in a really great team of folks here in the state as well as some outside the state to say, here's what's really going on. Let's break this down. And really all you saw in the room, again, was the industry folks who kept lying and talking into the ears of these guys. And yeah, there was some shady moments I saw over at the State House for our friends, but in the end, they did the right thing. And, there was iGaming that was supposed to go in initially. We killed that from getting in the Senate, and then the next move was VLTs, the video lottery terminals that was supposed to be in. We'd see those popping up in all of our restaurants and bowling alleys and things.
They kind of look like slot machines.
Yeah, and that never happened. And the beauty of it is that to a person, everybody said, Dave, this is a done deal. You're not going to be able to stop this train. And thankfully, with the help of the people of God, we did.
Yeah, I was thinking about when we did our live stream when it first happened. I want to go back and find those clips because David, you were looking pretty mad at some of in the video because I don't want to say we were hopeless, but it was one of those things where it was like, man, this is coming hard and fast.
We need a wellness check on David.
Yeah, right.
I can't say. There was a lot of dirt that I was seeing, a lot of shady stuff that was going on. Folks that were supposed to be asking questions and vetting these bills weren't being vetted. They weren't asking questions, and I asked them why they weren't. That's all. I just, maybe it was a little angry. I had to apologize a couple times, but they know why.
But again, this is how the process is built to go, right? I mean, by all means, I look at this and say, the casinos have every right to hire lobbyists and show up and do their thing. And ultimately, though, the people's voices were heard. People in the districts, right? Pastors' voices were heard. And we had that letter. We got 120 pastors with everybody from, churches in Cincinnati to Alistair Begg up in Cleveland to, major denominational leaders were, a real cross section of the Ohio population signing on to that letter, saying, "Hey, please don't do this," and it worked, right? And again, this is one of these places. The only people that have an interest in fighting this is the body of Christ, right?
And don't misunderstand. Like, we still have to be vigilant on this because we still have several standalone bills that will need to be, killed. But the thing is, we know that we can kill those, right? If we could stop the budget move, we can definitely stop the standalone bills. And one of the things that a lot of the members were saying was, Dave, I'm opposed to the gambling expansion, but if it gets in this $60 billion bill, there's so many other good things, we might have to vote for it anyway. So everybody knew that, and for it not to get in the budget, that was just a huge miracle.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we look at some of the other broad categories of things that we saw in the bill, a couple of provisions to protect children. We saw a ban on cell phone use during school hours in public schools, which is something that we've talked about, and even our Ohio Christian Education Network is working on a phone-free school covenant for their schools to really keep distraction-free learning in our classrooms throughout the day.
No, again, if somebody were to show up at the State House and say, hey, if you do this right here and it costs nothing, here's an idea, it costs nothing, increase test scores by at least 15%, you'd be crazy not to do it. Improve behavior, all of those types of things. And that's the magic of keeping phones and these devices out of the classroom. And again, it doesn't fix everything in education, but it certainly fixes a major issue. And credit to the governor introduced this early on. They strengthened it in the House and the Senate. to make it absolutely clear, no phones during instructional time, and it's going to pay big dividends long term.
And another thing here, I want your take on, David, because you've been in the. This is going to be a bad pun, and I didn't intend it. You're going to be in the. You've been in the weeds a little bit with the marijuana reporting.
Nice. I thought you were going to say the weed game, but the weeds. That's good.
Never once smoked anything.
You can't talk about marijuana without too many jokes. It's the same thing with the transgender stuff. There's just too many puns.
That's a lie. Anybody ever smoke like just weed, like real weeds, like in a playground setting, just paper and then just real grass?
Did you do that? No. Who would do that?
I'm not saying I did it. I'm just, never mind. Go ahead, Mike.
You knew about it. There were some provisions around how they're going to study and report about marijuana effects, and just take us through some of the wins there and why this is a good thing in the wake of issue 2 and recreational use being legalized in Ohio.
Right. Now that the floodgates have been open to recreational marijuana here in the state of Ohio, the only way we're going to get some really good policy like we've seen in Colorado is to get reporting like we see in Colorado. And, this one was a little, the industry really tried to get sly here, and this was another hijack move on our behalf here at CCV. We say, okay, we've got the marijuana, let's do reporting, right? We send that over to some friends, and then next thing we know, in the reporting, it's the marijuana industry is advising this whole reporting situation. All of the major things we're supposed to be looking at, like cannabis use disorder, how is high-potency THC affecting pregnant women, how's it affecting the unborn children, not just suicide ideology, but how is this affecting completed suicides, right? Like we always say in Colorado, it is the #1 substance found in completed teen suicides. That's different than saying, okay, we got a bunch of kids that's thinking about suicide, right? And so, we crafted this language, we get it over there, and all of a sudden the industry's in there. And so thankfully we were able to hijack that back. And we got 100% of
hijackers. There were hijackers on the hijackers.
I'm the captain now.
Exactly.
Emphasis on high. Let's keep the puns going.
The one thing they did slip back in there, though, is a provision to look at the benefits, marijuana, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we'll go with that. But we got, Children's Hospital in there doing reporting on, the ER visits and things, kids getting these gummies, as well as the high-intensity drug trafficking area. It's an agency of the DEA. They will be in the mix, and there is no marijuana industry. So this is a big, big win for the state of Ohio, especially as it pertains to THC products and kids.
Yeah, and I think it's important to sort of look at both this gambling fight and the marijuana fight. And I'm going to, again, brag on David a little bit here, but this is why we're across the street from the State House. Because if we weren't here to jump on that, the gambling would have almost certainly gone in. But this is such a good one in particular, too, because the legalized marijuana passes at the ballot. The majority of the members don't support legalized recreational marijuana, and everybody would agree, hey, let's, if we want to make the case to voters one day to repeal this, let's study it, right? Let's do some studies and show, unfortunately, what you see in Colorado, which is the complete devastation, right? The increase in car accidents and kids use, all the stuff David went through. So members typically would be like, hey, okay, let's get a provision in there to do this. And again, keep in mind, this is a 5,000, 6,000 page bill, right? So members, nobody practically has the time. Even if you were to sit down and read the full 6,000 pages, you wouldn't understand all of what it does, because all of these areas it's just inserting what's being amended into the broader context of the law. So really what ends up happening in the process is the members depend on each other, and they depend on staff, and they depend on lobbyists to help them understand what a provision looks like, right? So typically on a provision like this, they'd say, hey, we want to do a study on this, and a staffer or a member or somebody would say, yep, we got a provision in there requiring a study on there. Would they actually go through and read the specific language of how that study is going to be conducted? Probably not. And I don't say that as a knock on them, right?
You can't know everything.
You can't know everything, right? Most members, honestly, when I'm talking to a freshman member, typically what I tell them is, hey, pick your one or two or three areas that you are really going to get to know well, that you feel passionate about, that you feel called about, and dig in deep on that, right? And become the person that knows, look at what Dave Thomas is doing with property tax, or look at what Gary Click has done on protecting children from the gender stuff, right? Or Matt Huffman's done on school choice. You can see how these guys that really go deep in a certain area, they can do really well. So anyway, if it wasn't for David looking into this issue and flagging it, we would end up with studies coming out saying, hey, you know what? Marijuana is actually not having that bad of an impact. Right. It's actually helping a lot, and it's really growing the economy. And that would have been the official word from the state of Ohio.
Yep.
Right? And that, again, I'm constantly having this argument in my head against the people that say Christians shouldn't be involved in politics, or why is CCV being so controversial, or why do we even, why are there even Christian lobbyists? We don't need that. If we're not here doing this doesn't get done, right?
Yeah, that is a good word. And another reporting tweak that we saw in the budget was around abortion reporting. And Aaron, what are some of the things that this new dashboard and the earlier annual report will do for the state of Ohio and the pro-life movement specifically?
That's the big. There were a lot of things that were included in this sort of updating the abortion report. Ohio actually has a really good report that comes out that shows how many abortions are being performed by, like, what type of abortions in what county. It's all de-identified data, so it doesn't reveal who the person was, who the woman was that had the abortion. But it's actually a fairly comprehensive report. The problem with it is it doesn't come out for 10 months. It takes forever. Again, we could get COVID test updates by the second, but we couldn't get a report on how many abortions were being performed, how many kids were dying from the abortion industry. So this updates it, so that report has to come out by March every year, so within 3 months, but also that there will be a dashboard that gives up-to-date numbers ran by the state, so that we can get a good sense of where abortion's happening, what kind, get services and support out and prayers out to all those various areas to try to save lives.
Yeah, to DeWine's benefit, he was strong on the pro-life stuff here, and the $20 million of Ohio pregnancy and parenting program money that came from the executive budget.
Yeah,
right, and so that stayed in. That's a huge. The ultrasound money, $5 million for ultrasound.
Jerry Serino.
That came in from the Senate. But yeah, all these provisions made it in. $750 million PRC tax credit.
Not $1 million, $750.
Yeah, $750 PRC tax
credit. That's a big tax credit.
Only David has that kind of tax bill.
Exactly. You see
all
how much
millions and billions I've been reading for the last
racking up. But that's a huge deal right there to support our pregnancy centers, where you can make a donation to a pregnancy center for up to $750, and the state will give you $750 back on your state income taxes if you have that liability. I mean, that's a huge win. That there's so many things like the Innocence Act, like the cell phone ban, like this provision that were standalone CCV priority bills, that if those things passed on their own, we would be celebrating nonstop. And they're all in this one budget. Praise God.
Yeah, and the local pregnancy resource centers do such great work. I know both of your wives obviously involved, and I've
shout out to you, babe. Lise Mahan, Stowe Pregnancy Resource Center, and
I've got a great relationship with Starting Point up in Knox County. They do amazing work there, and to see. This is why I can never make a serious point.
Hey, bro,
he's trying to get a word in edgewise.
I'm on this diet. Bro, I'm going all in on Lise Mahan.
You're trying to get her to lift the restrictions.
I just want to know, what kind of diet. There's no calories or anything in black coffee.
Y'all got me stressed out, man. She's trying to offset some of this.
This caffeine. All right.
Yeah. Anyway, great work by our local pregnancy resource centers, and special shout out to my friends at Starting Point in Knox County.
Go.
That's all I was getting.
There it is.
That's all I was trying to do. Good grief. It's like pulling teeth with you guys. I'm going to go on PTO for another week. What else? We got some other good stuff here, too. Biological reality is winning the day again.
Go figure.
So you can no longer find your feminine hygiene products in state government men's restrooms.
Go figure. And then there's only 2 sexes in Ohio. I'm glad we did this, right? It actually is a huge principle that's going to help, but it's like, we got to say this now, guys. Like, this was up for debate, that there's only, sex isn't assigned at birth.
Yeah. And I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
We actually, it's kind of bittersweet for us, though, because, we still have a lot of work to do in this area, especially in protecting women in private spaces. We've protected, the young kids in school bathrooms and things. But what about like Target bathrooms? What about government buildings for adult women, right? Do we need to protect them as well?
Dude, have you been in Target this month, though?
No, I don't go in Target.
Come on.
Last month.
Listen.
We're in July.
Listen.
It's already July.
No. Yeah, that's right. Last month. We were in Target this weekend, and when you first walk in, where the big Pride display was all America stuff.
Nice.
Like, huge 4th of July stuff, like all of that. And then we were walking through the kids section, and we stumbled upon what was apparently the Pride stuff, but it was just a rack of rainbow stuff. It wasn't even the big Pride, all of that. It was like the most kind of subtle, embarrassed, little thing in the back of the back of the kids section.
But
so
did you go to the dressing room, though?
Yeah, I did not.
All y'all run out to Target.
That's right.
All right, with the kids, y'all better be careful.
Just saying. Can we celebrate a win? Every time we try to celebrate a win around here, there's been, actually, it wasn't.
Y'all need to go to Meyer. Keep telling
come on. Meyer. Go ahead, move on. We're just moving. We're moving.
We need a petition or something to either get David Mahan more sleep or back on coffee.
Or back 4 o'clock, family.
One of those two things has to happen for the sake of our listeners. When we talk about these radical ideologies, there are a couple other things that at least touch on this. Number one, Medicaid funds not being used for initiatives that push DEI inclusion ideologies. And then also, we see a lot in the Planned Parenthood sex ed curriculum about them pushing the transgender stuff as well. But Ohio Adolescent Health Centers got almost $16 million for funding at-risk sexual education that doesn't promote that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a win for the good guys, right? And so that what you're looking at with that group is 9 different groups across the state of Ohio, fully funded. They could probably reach anywhere from 130, 140,000 public school students, doing great work, talking about prevention, sexual risk avoidance, character education, fatherhood, on down the line. This is a group that I used to be a part of when I was in the schools. And really blessed. Their line item got removed a couple years back and got absolutely zeroed out. And so to see them get this win and really just a good vote of confidence from the House and the Senate and the governor that we believe in the work that you do.
Yeah, and by no means was it the only fatherhood initiative that was supported. We did a press conference a couple weeks ago about the Responsible Fatherhood Initiative, and that's in there, part of our Hope in a Future study. We saw the success sequence being added to a number of classes that can be taught in public schools. So seeing some wins for families there as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and those are really long-term investments that pay big dividends. I mean, that's going back to the conversation we were having about the Hope in a Future report when it first came out, which is this crisis is not going to get changed overnight, right? You're dealing with big picture cultural issues, the way people think about how they should structure and order their lives, and so much of that is being formed by our public schools and Planned Parenthood teaching kids either one, that they are just naturally sexual beings and they're going to go out and make bad decisions, and so here's the best way to mitigate that risk, right? As opposed to what the Ohio Adolescent Health Centers do, having them in there teaching sexual risk avoidance education, or having things like this Responsible Fatherhood Initiative that's changing the narrative around fatherhood and marriage, which is the push that we have right now. So really excited. This is building a foundation for the state for the long run, and something that we're really looking forward to building onto.
Yeah, we've got some other good stuff in here. The success sequence, you've heard us talk about that here on the narrative. That got in as an acceptable curriculum for the state of Ohio. It's not mandated, but it starts a really good conversation. Thankfully, we've got Katrona's bill that deals with success sequence that would mandate this for every student. And this success sequence basically says, graduate high school, work a full-time job in your 20s, and then get married before having children. Then 97% will avoid poverty. And this is a 30-year longitudinal study, and one of the best studies we've ever seen on poverty avoidance. And so this is getting some really good attention in the hearings. If you've not seen these hearings, you've got to look them out. Check out, how do you oppose telling people that get
watch
married?
Ian Rowe's testimony.
Oh my goodness, Watch Catrona did a great job. Senator Brenner's doing a great job on this. But really, I want you to see who's opposing this. All right, like the Planned Parenthoods and why.
Well, and when they sent out an email against this, they basically said, "Why isn't the state dealing with stuff that matters, like childhood poverty?"
Right.
Like,
what do you
that's
mean?
exactly what we're saying.
Yeah.
But again, their ideology is the only way to deal with that is to just give people more money.
Yeah.
Right.
Or kill babies.
Right.
Just
fewer people or more money is essentially their solution. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's been. Is there anything I forgot? I feel like.
We got the LifeWise.
That's right. Yeah.
To fix that.
In there because again, for those who don't know, that this is just the games the public schools play, which is we passed the bill that said schools have to allow religious release time, and so the school districts started saying, sure, we'll allow religious release time for 5 minutes, or like they just came up with all of these ridiculous ways of just bad faith going about enforcing the law, right? This is why I always say local control should be at the state level, because you get these ideologues and these bad actors that have no reason to. That's just a spiteful thing to do, and so again, we had to go back and fix that provision
at a minimum.
Yeah, exactly. And like we said, then the other really big one. That's going to set up Ohio for success in the years to come is getting to a flat tax this time, and getting to a flat tax through responsible cuts, right? Not through expanded gambling, but getting to a baseline flat tax to get us to a place where we can one day eliminate the income tax.
Yeah. So that's a pretty deep dive on the Ohio budget. Before we let everybody go, there's also federal budget moving on. Aaron, can you give us like 2 minutes of where that is, or things we should be watching out of DC?
And again, it's such a fluid moment right now. And again, we're recording this on Tuesday right now.
Mm-hmm. It's all a blur.
It's all a blur. But what I'm hearing as the final, all of the big stuff that Trump wanted, right? The extension of the Trump tax cuts, expanded border funding, all that good stuff. That's all obviously in there. The frustrating side was there's this thing called the parliamentarian in the Senate that has a lot of power to kick stuff out of the reconciliation bill. And what's special about the reconciliation bill is you only need 50 votes to pass that bill, or 51 votes, I should say, to pass that bill. And so the Byrd rule that the parliamentarian enforces is what is in place to try to stop policy from getting into what is meant to be a purely budgetary bill. So we were talking about this with the staff the other day, and the purpose of this, I remember a few years ago, the parliamentarian kicked out the Johnson Amendment, which said churches can't speak to politics, or 501c3s can't speak to politics. And that got kicked out of the reconciliation bill. And I was really upset about that, but I kind of understood it because it had no fiscal impact. Well, now the parliamentarian was starting to kick out a whole bunch of stuff earlier this week, like the federal tax credit and the defunding Planned Parenthood and defunding the gender transitions and Medicaid. Ultimately, I think a lot of stuff did get cut. I think defunding Planned Parenthood is not going to make it into the budget, which makes me unbelievably angry. And I think we'll just need to find a time once this all gets done to bring on somebody who really understands all this to talk through it more. But it does look like the federal school choice program, the federal tax credit, is going to pass. And that's a big win on top of a bunch of other things in there. Overall, I think I don't want to say it's the best of a bad situation. And the bad situation is just when you don't have 60 votes in the Senate, your hands are tied of what you can do. I think it's a pretty good bill, but there are some things that I'm still looking at this thing like, man, at some point we got to rip the Band-Aid, and nobody voted for this parliamentarian, and we're letting her just decide what goes into the reconciliation bill and what doesn't.
Well, a lot going on. As always, we appreciate you folks listening, and we'll keep you up to date on the national budget bill. And David, thanks so much for all your work on the state budget bill. And
he does a good job.
CCV team,
that, right?
Yeah, you and the policy team did a great job of getting some good things in there, and we'll, like I said, get the popcorn ready for when any possible overrides start working up. So we'll catch you again next week, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in to this budget breakdown on The Narrative. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.